The Drogbar of Highmountain were once slaves of Neltharion, aka Deathwing in ancient times, before being liberated with the help of Highmountain just after the Sundering. On that note, they are notable for being the ones to attach Deathwing's adamantine armor plates, which were engineered by his goblin slaves, to hold his body together after being malformed from using the Demon Soul. However, not much is known exactly about their origins as a species. There's two exact sources of information and a few not exactly canon hints. Namely, Xal'atath states that they are, quote, failed experiments of the Titans, which she took as an explanation of their inability to create using the hammer of Khaz'goroth. The other source is a plaque written, or at least dictated by Deathwing, as a reminder to the Drogbar that they are his slaves and that rebellion would be futile, where he calls them, quote, children of the earth. The not really canon hint is a quest which names them, as a pop culture reference, rock trolls, which some members of the lore community have taken especially seriously because in the cancelled Warcraft Adventures game, Deathwing's servants were trolls. Based on the two canon sources, some in the lore community speculate that they are descendants of the Trogs, but again, the exact details are unknown. While the Drogbar are well known for their war against the Highmountain Tauren during the events of Legion, the relationship between the two races has not always been harmonious. Namely, while they relied heavily on the Highmountain Tauren, specifically the Rivermane tribe, who were the first to trade with them for food, the Drogbar, even the friendly ones, think that the Highmountain Tauren and their dwelling places stink of, quote, wood and clean air. There were also occasional skirmishes even before the open war during the events of Legion, as the Highmountain Tauren Fala Steel Totem states that her father was slain by the Drogbar, who also took the family hammer, quote, several years ago. Still, despite the tensions and the dislike, open warfare was indeed something completely new between the Drogbar and the Highmountain Tauren. Notably, individual Drogbar began taking new titles for themselves during the war, the most notable one being that of Siege Brule, which has inconsistent meanings but means something akin to a military commander. Politically speaking, the Drogbar are fairly disunited. Namely, while they are ruled by an Underking, the most recent one being Dark Rule, who resides in their capital, Nilfarion's former lair, the most fringe, geographically speaking, tribes don't really listen to his commands. In that regard, the friendly Stone Dark tribe and an unknown neutral tribe refuse to join the rest of their kind in the war against the Highmountain Tauren. In addition, there are even more fringe groups of Drogbar who serve the Old Gods, one that's probably part of the Twilight's Hammer in the deep roads of Highmountain, and a more hidden one, the Necrodark, who served Uul'gyneth the Darkness until his recent defeat. The method for choosing a new Underking of the Drogbar is also unclear, but it is implied to take a long time. It's also possible, depending on how you interpret the line, that the title predates their liberation from Deathwing. Namely, Navarog, the leader of the Stone Dark, states that Darkrule's death broke the Drogbar tribes, and reuniting them will be a, quote, long task. And indeed, even after the Underking's death, there are still several Drogbar groups who war with the Highmountain Tauren. It's also implied that, while they are not typically violent, they are a fickle people, as the Stone Dark emissary to Thunder Totem tells the player, quote, we will never forget the great deeds you have done in service of our people until we do. The Drogbar culture and magic is heavily centered around stones and physical or mental strength. Before the recent war of the Highmountain Tauren, the vast majority of their spellcasters only used earthen magic, though a few tried unsuccessfully to tap into other natural power sources. They also use their magic to create rock and crystal guardians, which I suppose are somewhere between golems and earth elementals, only they are fairly simple-minded and, while loyal to their creator, often disobey their commands. They use the resources they have underground to a great extent, creating potent alchemy, often insecticides which they trade with the Highmountain Tauren, and becoming master jewel crafters. Notably, some of the most important Drogbar in history, such as the legendary Liftbrul of the Stone Dark tribe, have had their corpses immortalized in stone. It's quite possible that this tradition evolved, possibly as a form of reversal, from the time they were servants of Neltharion, as the Black Dragon turned one Drogbar, the Grey One, to stone as punishment for leading a rebellion against him. In ancient times, Deathwing also ordered the Drogbar to merge the elements into a, quote, binding ore, believed to be modern-day Elementium, which he thought would be the key to his ascension to power. Elementium is one of the toughest ores on Azeroth, and indeed before the Shattering, Deathwing had the Twilight's Hammer replace his damaged adamantine armor plates with Elementium ones. Its origins, though, are not entirely clear. Other than the Drogbar experiments, which as far as we know failed even after 50 attempts, Elementium has also been stated to be a creation of the conflict between the old gods and their minions. It's also been heavily associated with the elemental planes. For instance, Sulfuras and Thunder Fury are both made of Elementium, and the Twilight's Hammer readily used the stuff since Cataclysm, where it became much more easily accessible. As to how these somewhat contradictory explanations fit together, well, your guess is as good as mine. The Drogbar also revere and use the giant worms of Highmountain in industry as well as in warfare. Namely, even since the time they served Neltharion, they worshipped Naraxis, the quote, mother of monsters, and offered constant sacrifices so that she can nurture new generations of worms for the Drogbar to use. Especially ever since the recent war of the Highmountain Tauren, they also enslave and breed the other worms of Highmountain, presumably unrelated to Naraxis, the rock worms, for their ends. On one occasion, and possibly on several others, like the sand gnomes of Terakar Forest and the Fremen of Arrakis, the Drogbar also utilized drums to call upon the worms.